and welcome to the Scottish Roadscast, a podcast all about Scotland's roads, bridges and motorways. I'm Stuart Baird.
And I'm John Hassel.
And this month we're also joined by
Duncan Macknight. Myself, how are we doing?
Good to see you, Duncan. Glad to have you here because this month we're celebrating 40 years of the Kessock Bridge, a key link in the A9 in Inverness and in the north of Scotland.
I've been looking forward to this one, by the way. I really, really have.
It's always good to have a special. We enjoy our special podcast.
And it's been a while.
It has been.
Yes.
Yeah. So Duncan, you've come along. As I say, you're a resident A9 expert.
Yes.
If there's something to know about that road,
You can ask me questions. I'll probably be able to answer it.
No pressure, Duncan.
No pressure, no.
Yeah. So, like we've done in the past with our other big anniversaries, like Kingston and Erskine and Kincardine, we're going to go right through all the way back to the planning and history of the bridge.
Yep.
Talk about how it all came to be, who was involved, why they were involved, what they wanted, what went well, what didn't go well. We'll talk about the construction of the bridge itself and the design. We'll give a wee bit of background about the opening, because 40 years ago this month.
Indeed.
And then we'll talk about things that have happened on the bridge since in terms of maintenance, maybe even what the future holds. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the events and things we have planned to celebrate the anniversary that's coming up on the 6th of August.
I can see why this is called a special edition.
Yes.
There's a lot to go through.
It's rich.
Indeed, there is. Okay, let's just kick straight into it then. Okay, so Duncan, over to you.
Yes, right, okay. So, I'll give you a bit of background. The Kessock Bridge is up in Inverness. It's the big cable stay bridge that carries the A9 over the Bewley Firth to the Black Isle. And it's a very important link. And it takes you all the way up to the far north. To give you a bit of context, if you go back to, let's say, 1960, and you wanted to go up to Dornoch in Invergordon, up to the far north, for example, from Inverness, you would go through Inverness town centre, you would cross the Ness Bridge and join the long route into Bewley from Clacknaharry. That was a very, very long way. You'd then go through Bewley, Muirvord, and then Cononbridge and Dingwall, and then you would make your way all the way along the north side of the Cromarty Firth.
Now, I hadn't appreciated this until I started doing some research for the Kessock Bridge, and I hadn't realised how just circuitous the A9 had been, all the way around the heads of those firths, all the way up, adding miles and miles and miles onto the length of that.
And I also hadn't appreciated this when I'd done the North Coast 500, that assuming that it was taking in the Kessock Bridge. It doesn't. It goes the way you've just said around Muirvord.
Yeah, so you were going via the old road.
So look how much of a saving the time that having Kessock's there.
So the old route, if you want to go up to Dornoch from Inverness, it would be around about 75 miles, roughly, and it would take over 2.5 hours of driving to get up there. All single carriageway, going through all the wee places. It would take a while.
So you've already convinced me of the need for this bridge.
We should build it.
Yeah. So there's clearly a need for people up in the Inverness area to say, right, we can do a bit better than this. So as the 60s progressed and as Forth Road Bridge and Tay Bridge opened, they were big successes. So obviously up in the north, we said, well, why don't we do some improvements to the road network? Now in 1968, the Highlands and Islands Development Board, who were kind of overseeing the Highlands, they commissioned a report by the Jackhome's Development Group because they knew that we had to do something. So they got this report to say, well, we want to do a bit of redeveloping, we want to improve the roads, what could we do, what's the best option? And this report was called Murray Firth, a plan for redevelopment.
Now that this report ties in very well in the context of the time with other locations doing similar things. Thinking about what Glasgow was doing with the comprehensive development areas, Edinburgh was doing the same, Dundee had renewal. So it's not a surprise to see that Inverness had their own sort of similar study.
Now the report came in and it proved a bit controversial. A couple of things that they proposed, Jackhome's proposed, was to build new housing areas, new developments on agricultural land, so farmland, which farmland is a bit scarce up in the Highlands because it's quite a rural area. Farmland is quite rare. And one of the main road proposals was not to cut across the Black Isle over the Bewley Firth, but to follow the existing road and widen it to dual carriageway as far as Dingwall.
Now that deviates quite a bit, say, from the road south of Inverness, where by that stage, am I right in saying that they had already announced that they were going to comprehensively redevelop the A9?
It was around about that time that they said, okay, Perth Inverness, we're going to have to redevelop this because it's the only real decent thing we can do. North of here, I think we'll just follow what's there already. And given the traffic flows and what was expected, I can understand why that would probably have been considered realistic at that stage. Now, these controversial plans got the attention of a gentleman called Ray Clark, and he lives in Edgerton, and he was a farmer. And he noticed the poor use of farmland in the report because he was a farmer, so he knew about this.
Yeah.
And along with a chap called John Smith, who was from Aberdeen, he was a geography expert, they saw these proposals and said, right, this isn't really good enough. Lots of strange things are going to be happening. Why don't we come up with something a bit better? So they moved all the housing area onto forestry, so saving the agricultural land, and then they rerouted the road over the Bewley Firth, across the Black Isle, and over the Cromarty Firth. And they called this plan the Crossing of the Three Firths. What was the third firth then? The third firth was Dornoch Firth. Yeah. That was taken forward a little bit later on. Okay. But we'll be focusing on Kessock at the moment. Yeah. And they teamed up with Pat Hunter Gordon. He lived in Bewley, and he worked at AI Welders in Inverness, and he had the manpower to produce this booklet. Yeah. Now, they launched this booklet in October 1969. They called a big press conference to say, look, this is a bit more of a sensible idea. Why don't we have a look at this? And it gained a lot of press attention, and it was pretty popular. Yeah. Because they said, well, this is going to cut a lot of length off of the journey to time north. Why don't we go forward with this? So I've got a wee quote from the booklet that I'm going to read out just to give you an idea of what it was going on. Okay. So while this pamphlet is intended to present the case for improved communications for transport undertakings, industry, commerce, farmers and all road users, the photographs included highlight a number of dangerous bottlenecks on one 30-mile stretch of the A9 road. Apart from the simple question of bad communication and its effect on the viability of the area, those in the Highlands who travel frequently on this road have a right to be concerned, particularly when black ice, packed snow, tiredness, or someone else careless driving comes to the aid of the man-made problems. Yeah, interesting. Pretty hard-hitting. Now, how does this then all tie in with what, say, the Scottish Development Department were considering? So obviously they had commissioned their own report through the Inverness Development Agency that you mentioned. Yeah. So they already thought, no, we're just going to do this online upgrade of the road as it is. How did they become involved and ultimately approve of this plan? So their main objector to the Three Firths plan was the Highlands and Islands Development Board, who said it's a good idea, but we don't want to, we've got a report, why don't we just progress with this and get things moving? We don't want to delay anything any further because then money might disappear and things might change. So this started a bit of a back and forth battle as to Three Firths or inland route. Now there was an election in 1972, and Gordon Campbell, you might have heard of, was elected Secretary of State. Elected as the Secretary of State for Scotland. Now he coincidentally stayed in the Inverness area. Ah, did he? I didn't know that. I think it was Croy, or I might be wrong there, but it was in the Inverness area. And he was quite aware of the Firth campaign because they sent this booklet out to politicians, to people who would maybe push the thing forward. And he noticed that, the A9 needs a bit of improvement, so he ordered a feasibility study, and this was given to Crouch and Hogg. Okay. Now, there will be people out there who will be listening, right? And some of our listeners are well versed with the facts and figures. The election that Mr. Campbell came in was 1970. 1970. That was Apologies for that. The Ted Heath government of 1970 to 74. Right. That was the Harold Wilson government was unexpectedly beaten in the election of 1970. They came in and Gordon Campbell was put in, and he was quite a rival of the Labour Secretary of State for Scotland, Willie Ross, who oversaw the motorway proposals and developments in Scotland. So they had a bit of a rivalry. So when Gordon Campbell came in, not just in Inverness, as you're telling us here, but across Scotland in the M8 and places like that, there were a few changes made to some things. So that's interesting, Okay. And I didn't realise he was a local, but that explains a few things. And why suddenly between 1968 and 1970 opinions changed so much. Indeed. Indeed, very much.
So this Ray Clark that you've mentioned here, he was a farmer.
He was a farmer. He lived up near Dornoch.
I know what we've ultimately ended up with, and I think it's quite something that's noteworthy that a local resident has been able to put something together with the help of an expert to basically dictate where this route is going to go. I mean, that is community involvement. Yeah, you're right. Now, you were just about to tell us about Crouch and Hogg. So they were appointed by the Scottish Development Department. Same thing. When did that happen? Did you say?
It was around about 1970, I think.
So that was probably after the election then.
A little after the election, they were given this to say, go and have a look at it and see what we can do with it. So Crouch and Hogg went away and did their studies, and 9 options were considered of various routes across the Black Isle around the A9. These were eventually narrowed down to 3 potential options. Yeah. So option 1, I suppose, was to improve the existing A9, which is what the Jackhome's report suggested. So they had a look at that, if it was possible. Why don't we build a low-level bridge over the Bewley Firth at South Kessock, so something nice and low.
Yeah.
And then the third option was a high-level bridge over the Bewley Firth at Longman and a new route across the Black Isle. I wonder which one was
sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So option 1, which was the Jackhome's proposal, this was ruled out. It was too expensive. It would be very disruptive because there's a lot of things happening around that A9 corridor. There's a lot of settlements, properties. You've got Bewley, Muirvord. It would be disruptive to construct, and there's a lot of poor ground conditions because, of course, it's near the Bewley Firth, so you've got a lot of firth problems there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Option 2 was ruled out as well. Now, this bridge, this low-level bridge, would be east of the canal.
Right.
And if anyone has been in Inverness in the summer, you notice how often the canal bridge is open.
This is the Caledonian Canal.
Caledonian Canal. So you've got a lot of boats opening the bridges throughout the summer, and this causes a bit of disruption. So this would disrupt the A9.
Yeah.
And option 3, which was the high-level bridge, this was picked.
Okay.
It was financially better than improving the existing A9, and it would greatly improve the journey times, and it was chosen and was announced along with the A9 project, Perth Inverness upgrade, in September 1972.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the A9 between Perth and Inverness, that was fully rebuilt. We've already spoken about that in a podcast.
A wonderful podcast.
A wonderful podcast. So
110 miles
110 miles
road.
of new road from Broxton all the way up to Longman. All in a new alignment. We're doing a bit of work on it at the moment as well, with A9 dualling.
It's never finished.
Yeah. But north of here, there was a lot of further improvements as well. So I'll just go into some of the sections across the Black Isle. Now, these were all designed by Crouch and Hogg. So it was a modern 7.3 metre carriageway with reflector curbs on it.
Oh, we see plenty of them
I'm
along
a
the
big fan of the reflector curbs.
We know.
Yeah. So starting at the Inverness end and working across the Black Isle, we've got the Kessock Bridge approaches. Now, this runs from Longman to Charleston. Now, to give you a bit of context, Longman is the Longman roundabout at the south end of the bridge.
That's at the football stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that included the south approach embankment up to the bridge across the rubbish tip. There's a bit of problems there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it also included about a mile at the north end as well, going to the North Kessock Junction. Right. And this was built by Watson and McGregor Limited, or JG McGregor, and it opened. Well, it was finished in August 1975. It opened, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
so it was finished there.
Similar thing with Erskine in some ways, except the approaches were there before the bridge.
That's right. Yeah. So that kind of gives us an indication here that the approach roads are completed in 1975. Quite obviously, they were keen to get the bridge open as soon as possible. Yeah. So tell us a wee bit then about the development of the bridge, and why then did it take until 1982 to actually get it finished?
Well, the initial designs for the Kessock Bridge, it was Crouch and Hogg who came up with the initial design.
Yeah.
And they put a design in for about a 30 million bridge. Is that right? And it was quite a interesting structure. Now, I've got a bit of an extract from an engineering paper written by one of the guys who were on the bridge called Leslie Clements. He wrote a technical paper about the bridge. So the original detailed design for this bridge was prepared by the consulting engineers Crouch and Hogg of Glasgow. The design was for a continuous rectangular steel box girder with a stiffened plate deck carrying dual 7.3 metre carriageways, central reserve and footways. The cross-section, 4 metres deep, was to be continuous over the 64 metre approach and the 240 metre main spans. The navigation spans being cable stayed from a single A-frame tower on the south side of the channel. This layout was adopted to avoid backstays or cables over the 651 metre radius horizontal curve at the north end of the bridge. So imagine a big tower. Imagine a big letter A as a tower.
Think of a much bigger version of the footbridges on the M80 at Cumbernauld.
I was just thinking of that. That's very modern. I always think of that as quite a modern thing. You know, we're talking back in.
Those bridges have been there since the 70s.
But they're footbridges, Stuart. We're talking about, so it's causing a dual carriageway.
Same principle, much larger scale.
So this big, that would have been quite something.
Yeah. Although with box girders as well, which the footbridges don't have. But in terms of the A-frame cable stay, the Crouch and Hogg obviously very well known for the twin box girder White Cat Viaduct.
Yeah.
In the M8 at Glasgow.
I was just going to say the Renfrew bypass.
Yeah.
They also did a couple of the bridges over the canal on the A82.
Right.
A couple of them in the 1930s. There's a plaque on one of them in Inverness. Lots of other wee bits and pieces as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So initial cost estimates for this bridge was around about 30 million.
Yeah.
And,
which, by the way, putting that into context, so this is what, 1975?
1975,
right?
yeah.
So Kingston Bridge had cost 11 million in 1970. Erskine had cost, about 11, 12 in 1971.
Yeah.
So, to suddenly go from that to 30 million is a considerable amount of money, for a crossing of Erskine, for example, is higher.
Yes.
Than Kessock would be. So that I can understand why to the Scottish office that 30 million they might be like,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Considering the amount of traffic that they probably thought this route was going to use.
Yeah.
So the Scottish Development Department said, this is a bit pricey.
Yeah.
So they said, could you go back and do another design? This was also ruled out. And they did a lot of revisions, but they said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and let's start again.
Yeah.
So Crouch and Hogg were teamed up with Ove Arup and Partners, who you might be aware of.
Yeah.
And teamed up and to come up with a new design. And this was let as a design and build contract.
Okay.
And this was the first time this was done for a major bridge in the UK.
It was one of the first times it had been done at all in the UK because we were not big on design and build. I mean, nowadays that's common practice, but then it was very unusual. It was one of the first design and build projects, certainly in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, that was something I read when I was doing my own sort of bit of research in there. And I've just run that 30 million through the Bank of England inflation calculator for 1975.
Oh, right.
And you're coming out about £190 million now. Now, for a major crossing now, we would look at 190 million and probably go, actually, that's all right. But given the change in legislation and environmental considerations, all those sorts of things that we didn't have then.
You preempted me jumping in saying all the extra reports and the preamble that you have now adds considerably to the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, to summarise, then, it was considered expensive at the time for what it was going to offer. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it's also a time when money was much tighter than it had been, say,
because
we're
mid-70s now, and this
economic crises, oil
OPEC.
crisis, all that sort of thing. Yeah. So, you can understand why they were a bit hesitant. So, they, as you said, they had this alternative tender where they tried to put it out again, and that sort of fell down as well.
Yeah.
That was at that stage, obviously, the Scottish officer said, look, you guys, you've done okay. However, we think maybe you need a wee bit more expertise. And that's obviously where the Ove Arup have come in. And they obviously had a bit more, sort of expertise there. So they decided to go design and build.
Design and build, yeah.
As you say.
Yep.
And tell us about that process and how did that all come together?
So there was 6 or 7 consultants that were put forward tenders and designs for this new bridge. Now we've got there's a graphic in the opening booklet of all these different tenders, and they all look very, very different. They're all quite interesting. There's a big arch bridge, I think. There's the cable stay bridge. There's a one that's similar-ish to Erskine. Is that
it's
right?
Almost identical to Erskine. Just going back a step through the process for the design and build progress. When I was reading reading up on this, when I was preparing some of our stuff, I noticed actually that they had a bit of a competitive dialogue, and they invited anybody interested initially to make submissions. Yeah. And through 1976, 1977, I believe actually they had 16 expressions of interest initially. Right. And that then was whittled down to that final 6 that you mentioned there. And yeah, you're right. There were 3 concrete options and 3 steel. One of them was almost identical to Erskine. Yep. There was another one that, like the arch. Quite similar to the Tyne Bridge. Yeah. In Newcastle.
There was one... Yeah. I think there was one very similar to Friarton. I think Freeman Fox might have done that one.
I'm just looking at them on my screen here. So there was the Laying Monsell one, which was like the Erskine option. McAlpine, Dickerhoff and Wildman, also quite similar to Erskine. The cable detail was slightly different. That Laying Monsell one had a very interesting raked support in the firth. Then we had the Monk, MEN, McGregor, Clark and Chapman, which Atkins. Yeah. That was like the single tower cable stay.
Like the original
one. The original proposal. We then had Wimpy, Clark and Chapman, Highland Fabricators, Babty and Leonhardt.
Leonhardt, yeah.
That's the arch. Which is an interesting option. And then finally we had the Taylor Woodrow, Campinon, Bernard. Which didn't have a tower at all. That was a concrete option.
Yeah, was that kind of similar to Friarton?
Friarton, yeah.
It is a bit Friarton-like. I would say actually it's quite similar to Dornoch. Looking at this,
all right, okay.
Quite much higher level.
Higher than Dornoch.
Much higher
So
level.
Relying on you describing these, Stuart, because obviously our listeners can't see that.
The prices ranged from the 17.5 for the winning submission, which came obviously from.
Oh goodness, who was it? Cleveland Bridge and Redpath Dorman Long,
in conjunction with
Trafalgar House.
Yep, Trafalgar and. I'm just testing them here. This
I know.
Dr. Homberg.
Dr. Homberg, who had designed a very similar bridge in the Rhine.
Yes.
And their price obviously came in the cheapest at 17.5. The others ranged from 18.3 up to 24.9 million, so a bit more expensive. And in typical UK procurement fashion, we went with the cheapest priced, which is not unreasonable. The proposal they'd come up with was perfectly decent and looked to be a good idea. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that's actually the most attractive of the 6 options submitted.
Yeah, I see.
Yes, so I think so. Okay, keep talking then, Duncan. Tell us more.
This contract from Cleveland Bridge and Redpath Dorman Long with Trafalgar House and Dr. Homberg was let on the 21st of June 1977.
Yes. And
the substructures and the foundations were to be designed by Trafalgar House. Several checks to the design were made and a couple of advanced works like boreholes and things were done in the Firth, and work began on the main structure in April 1978.
And before construction began, actually, and this is an important point, they had a consultation with the Royal Fine Arts Commission for Scotland, who were consulting on a lot of proposals at that time, and even later than this, before things changed. And they likewise they thought the aesthetic of that proposal was attractive, and wouldn't have an adverse impact on the.
I mean, you can see it in certain areas from miles away.
Yeah,
so it's got to look good.
Yeah,
I'm always correcting some people because some people think it's a suspension bridge. No, it's not a suspension bridge, and it's it looks similar because it's got those kind of two towers, but no, it's cable stayed. Yeah, some people see that because they see the two towers and they think Forth.
Well, actually, I was corrected recently because I kept referring to towers, and a young engineer who shall remain nameless corrected me and said, actually, at Kessock we refer to pylons.
Pylons, I've heard that. Do you know? But I said that about Erskine, and then somebody corrected me and said they're not. They said it's towers at Erskine.
Towers at Erskine, pylons at Kessock.
Well, you can.
It's these bridge people.
You can always count on those Highlanders to be awkward.
Before you move on, Duncan, before this turns into a big episode of Mastermind, I'm just going to ask some quite basic questions because there might be people listening to this who drive over this bridge all the time or live in Inverness and just want to know this. Previous to the bridge being there, we obviously mentioned about the circuitous route going. Was there any ferries that were there originally?
There was a ferry. It went from South Kessock to North Kessock. There was about a fleet of about 4 or 5 boats, I think.
Only 2 towards the end of service.
Only 2 towards the end, yeah.
One of which was the Rose Haw.
Yes.
Which remains in service today further down at, what's the place just south of Fort William that still has the wee ferry?
Is it?
Connell? Is it the Connell ferry?
No, Connell's got a bridge.
Connell's got the bridge. There's the ferry service south of Fort William. I believe that vessel's still operating on that.
So I take it once the bridge had opened, these ferry services kind of went.
They were more of a local way of getting onto the Black Isle.
Which
is why the A9 didn't go over the ferry. Yeah.
So the other question I have, we spoke at length about different bridge options. Bridge came back again. Was a tunnel ever considered? Because certainly in the discussions about Forth, tunnels are something that comes up all the time.
No
tunnels.
No tunnels.
Why?
No. Well, there's a lot of ground problems.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have to be quite a deep tunnel, and then at the north side it would have to have a blooming steep gradient to get up.
You're right, because there's always the approach to the portals that you need to do something like that.
And then you've got the Great Glen.
You've got fault line
as well, going right up the middle of the Firth.
You probably shouldn't tunnel through fault lines.
Certainly a lot.
Well, there you go. If you were wanting to ask that question, that has been very well answered, I think. So no, that's fine. But I'll let you find your space again, Duncan, and you can tell us more about how it came to open.
Okay. So, Stuart, I hope you're going to help me here with a bit of bridge.
I will certainly. I have some text here, which I'm fortunate. I've got the new webpage.
The new webpage.
For Kessock, that will be going live shortly. I have that in front of me, so I'll be able to fill in some gaps. Shall I read from the web article?
You can do it.
You both put it together, so yes.
Do a bit of reading.
It's a fairly high level description of the bridge. Obviously, construction of the bridge took a little over 4 years. That was longer than originally anticipated. It was originally thought the bridge would be ready by 1981.
Early 1981.
Duncan and I were having a chat earlier, and it seems that industrial action and weather issues.
There was a bit of striking. There was a lorry strike, and there was a welders strike as well.
So lorry strike would hold up all your materials,
and the welders are helpful because they need to weld the bridge together.
Of course, it's not Lego.
There was a very nasty winter in, was it 1981?
81, December 81, I think it was particularly bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember one engineer told me about how there was ice smashing into the temporary supports, causing a bit of damage. It was quite a brutal winter.
Not so good, okay, I'll just give you a wee bit of an overview of the bridge itself.
Great.
We'll do that. So the 22 metre wide deck, comprising steel plate, trough stiffeners and 1.5 metre deep cross girders, is supported on a 3.25 metre deep plate girder, which is visible along both edges. So if you're standing outside the bridge, you'll see these things running along. Now the deck accommodates two 7.3 metre wide carriageways and originally 1.8 metre wide footways, although I'm told that has narrowed as a result of the high containment parapet that was put in, or the barrier that was put in a few years ago. Those decks were originally surfaced with 40 millimetres of mastic asphalt. That was renewed in 2013-14.
2013-14
we'll
on each side.
Public services, including water and electricity, and I believe telecom, are carried below the deck.
So that's similar to Erskine.
Similar to Erskine, the 240 metre main span provides a minimum navigation clearance of 29 metres.
Go get your boats under.
Yes, exactly. And groups of 8 spiral strand cables in a harp formation support the main spans. The cables are held at their lower ends by anchorage boxes on the outside of the main girders, and the main pylons, each 40 metres tall, rest on rubber pot bearings. Now, the presence of the Great Glen fault line below the Bewley Firth meant an allowance had to be made for earth tremors, and two 400-ton seismic buffers capable of withstanding accelerations of up to 1/10 of gravity were installed in a Scottish first. And I believe a Scottish last. I don't think we've had any.
I don't think so.
Either.
No.
There is one bridge on the A7 that has a special joint in it to stop because there is a fault down there. This is just south of the bypass.
All right. Interesting.
There
you go. John surprised us with some bridge
like A7 related stuff, but there is. And on a future podcast where we will cover roads in the borders and those areas, I can talk you all about that bridge.
All about the A7.
And the main expansion joints in the bridge can actually absorb movement of up to 500 millimetres.
Yeah.
So, half a metre.
That's big.
That's a lot.
So it's kind of like cone joints that it's got on either end then. Right.
Basically, okay. Although I think they were renewed, weren't they? When
the north one was renewed in 2011.
Yeah.
I think.
So that's two, one at either end, because Erskine's got one, doesn't it?
Erskine's got one. It's fixed at one end and free at the other. Yes, that's right.
It.
So the 1,052 metre continuous steel superstructure, 1,056 depending on who you speak to, incorporating almost 9,000 tonnes of steel, was fabricated at the Cleveland Bridge Works in Darlington and transported to the site in 16 metre long sections by road, interestingly. Cleveland Bridge, famous engineering company, sadly went bust earlier this year. A lot of history there. We're told a lot of their archive has been secured. So that's good news.
Good.
That was a shame. Not quite sure what's happening with the business, whether it's been saved or not, but a shame.
It's good to know the records have been kept.
Indeed, and those 16 metre long sections, they were installed using the cantilever erection method, fairly similar to other bridges we've discussed in the past in the podcast, like Kingston. So basically what that means is they cantilevered out from each side of the Firth in this case until they met in the middle. And that was, in effect, two cantilevers working out towards the other.
Wasn't that similar to what they've done on Queensferry as well?
Yes, to an extent. Although there was some pushing out as well at Queensferry.
They did pushing out for the approaches.
So, actually, Kessock, from an engineering point of view, a bridge engineering point of view, it's a fairly simple design.
It is.
Which is probably why it was the lowest price tender. Nothing wrong with that. It's pretty,
keep
aesthetically
it simple.
pleasing.
Yep.
And did you know that when it was finished, it was the first harp-type cable-stayed bridge in Britain, and it was the longest in Western Europe for a while as well.
Yeah, I'm actually just trying to think of the harp-style ones. When
cable-stayed bridges were still relatively new.
They were new
at
the time,
They had been in favour, as we spoke about for Erskine, they had been in favour many, many years before. But it was always the technology improved and things developed. They were able to get much longer spans, higher clearances and the like, and they came back into favour, and much cheaper to construct than suspension bridges.
Absolutely, less maintenance, less problems with these things. I mean, the Dartford Crossing, is that not harp style?
That
as well?
was also designed by Dr. Homberg.
Was it?
Yeah, so it's basically a big version of Kessock. Taking 4 lanes over the river.
Yeah. That was the 90s?
91.
Yep. Okay. So, it is interesting from a structural point of view. It's nice to look at, I would say. And I mean, that's about as much from a structures point of view I can tell you.
Structural point of view.
Now, again, you and I have been having regular chats about Kessock, and they did wind tunnel testing as they do with all major river crossings.
Yeah, Crouch and Hog did wind tunnel testing in Glasgow and found that the deck might move in the wind. Now, the wind has a clearance of about 5 miles, basically run up the firth to hit this thing. Yeah. And when it opened, it swayed in the wind a bit. Yeah. Now, cable stay bridges aren't really meant to sway in the wind. No. Suspension bridges are. If you look at Forth Road Bridge, it'll sway in the wind.
Move,
This isn't meant to sway in the wind. Yeah. But they predicted this, so they installed big viscous dampeners under the main towers to dampen out the movement. And when they were installed, the movement stopped completely.
Now, was I right in saying, maybe you'll know, I'm not sure, I think they were originally a bright yellow or orange colour.
I think they were.
And then the new ones, because they've been replaced, they're just like a drab grey. Yeah. That was, someone told me about that, and I thought, okay, interesting. But apparently you could see them from underneath pretty clearly because of the colour of them. So that's pretty interesting.
I think there's only one other bridge in the UK that has got something like that. It's way down. Is it Milford Haven Bridge?
Oh yes, I did it. Clydow, yeah. Yes. Yep, down in Wales. I saw that last year.
So how do these dampeners work then? Are they just largely
just absorb
They're like big. Is it big pistons? I want to say.
Exactly.
So like in a car. What you mean, like suspension almost? That kind of, but you stiffen it up.
Basically, it absorbs the adverse movement, so that the bridge is controlled in the way it's swaying. It's putting some resistance into the sway, basically, to prevent it rocking about.
Yeah. Another wind-related fact about the bridge: if you go over the bridge and look at the tower on the north side, notice that some of the cables have been tied together. Now they oscillated in the wind, and they weren't sure why, so they tied them together, and this seemed to stop it.
Right. Okay.
And to this day, that's still tied together, something moving.
Yeah, and you said tower. Pylon.
Oh, goodness me. Sorry, pylon. Sorry.
Yes. Aye. So, you know, it was good. They knew such things could happen. They were prepared for it. And within a few months of the bridge opening, that had been installed, and there's been no problem since.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes us up to the opening.
The opening.
Yeah.
Now, there was 2 openings. One... the bridge was all welded together in June 1982.
Yes.
And it opened to contraflow on the southbound side on the 19th of July 1982.
Right, okay.
So it half opened.
And now we have photos of that.
Yes, there's a couple of photos.
They will be appearing on the webpage, which we'll mention shortly.
Oh, good. Good. And then it was officially opened by Her Majesty the Queen Mother on Friday, the 6th of August 1982. I have heard the weather was terrible.
Right. Good Scottish summer weather.
Yeah. And a little quiz for Stuart here, since he gave you like a hard talk-esque grilling earlier. 12 years earlier, the Queen Mother opened another bridge.
The Kingston Bridge.
There you go. Well done.
Oh.
Redeemed.
Yep. Did the Queen Mother not also open the Tay Bridge?
She did.
Yes.
And she opened Dornoch Bridge as well.
There you go. It's good. He's looking very pleased with himself right now. For anyone that
I couldn't sit here and proclaim to be an expert on these things.
I just knowing all these nerdy facts.
So no, it's terrific. So
we got the bridge opened on the 6th of August.
Yeah. Bridge opened, and it had a major effect. Traffic in the Inverness decreased dramatically, and this eventually allowed for pedestrianisation.
Because no one would have had to have gone through anymore through the town. It was effectively completing a bypass.
And that came in conjunction with alterations to the A82 as well, didn't it?
Yeah, that came in the late 1980s. We built the Friars Bridge, and we built a
Fairhurst design.
Yep. And we improved a bit of road there, so that allowed for pedestrianisation. Journey times were cut, and the road safety was improved greatly, because we weren't winding along a wee road.
Yeah, and I'm sure all those villages and towns along the heads of those firths probably were quite happy to lose a lot of that.
If you go back
traffic.
40 years, they're probably massively different to how they are now.
Of course.
Yeah, because they don't have all the passing trade, but they've coped with it pretty well.
Now, a little anecdote for you that was shared with us by one of the engineers who were involved in the scheme, and people might find this funny. That there was a cyclist who was attempting to break the record of the Land's End to John O'Groats route.
Oh yes, I've heard this.
And he was looking to do it faster than anyone had before, and he got in touch with the engineers and said, I could save 15 miles off my trip if you let me cross this bridge. The bridge is not finished at this stage. So after a bit of deliberation, they decided, right, okay, let's let them do it. And they escorted him across the bridge site. It's still the construction site. And he smashed that record when he finally got to John O'Groats a few, a couple of days later or whatever it would have been. And I believe he held the record for some time. Whether that's true or not, well, who knows? But certainly the engineers.
That's quite a cool story.
Told us that.
I don't know if you could do that now with all the paperwork and health and safety and hard hats and all this sort of stuff.
He's doing a record. It's good PR doing these things as well. If you remember with like Queensferry, they let people walk and cycle on it before. Some of the M74 when it opens, you know. So
community engagement.
Yeah, that's it.
Make the public feel as though they're part of the process.
And of course they are.
Yeah. Fine. Good. Okay, so...
Do you want some facts and figures about what's happened to the bridge?
Just going to ask you about that, yeah.
So, as we've spoken about, it's got viscous dampeners underneath it to stop it moving in the wind. Yes. It's got earthquake buffers on the north side because it goes over the Great Glen Fault, which is what forms Loch Ness and all this geography stuff. I think everyone in Inverness seems to know that one.
This is... Right, so I've researched tons of these bridges over the years for various things, and this is the first one that I've done where people are genuinely interested and like the bridge. Erskine got that to an extent. Kingston folk were just like, I get stuck on that all the time. Kessock seems to be genuinely loved by people around it in the area.
Do you know what the thing is with Kingston? There's so many other bridges, I suppose, that were there in the city anyway that were taking things across the Clyde and so on. That Kessock done something that hadn't been done before, It is beautiful. Kingston is beautiful in its own ways. But.
I first saw Kessock Bridge for myself in 1991, and I was considerably younger than I am
Stuart,
now. And I would say that seeing that bridge so prominently on the horizon, dominating that town, influenced my interest.
I was a little boy as well. It was very early 90s. I see it going up to Ullapool.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
Yeah,
every day, every second curtains day. And he's like,
and when you're coming coming north to Inverness, you can see it at the top of the hill sweeping across.
Something about that harp formation just makes it stand out and make it look very different to just a typical other bridge.
It's certainly the biggest structure north of Perth.
Oh yeah,
it is. It's part of the kind of city's...
The biggest structure north of Queensferry Crossing.
You got Friarton, but it's bigger than Friarton.
Anybody could design a Friarton.
It's very much part of the skyline of Inverness that you see there. It's basically Inverness's Golden Gate in many ways.
Certainly is.
You're right. It's a gateway, and it's a gateway to the far north.
Yeah,
I would say. Like the way Bailston is to Glasgow and other. Features in the motorway and trunk road system are to their various locales. I would say Kessock is a gateway to the far north.
Certainly is.
It really is. It's synonymous with Inverness.
Yes.
And the Highlands. And that your bridge has achieved something when that's the way it's seen.
Certainly. There's a Snapchat filter of it. That's how important it is.
Right.
Some more facts and figures. Once it opened, it kind of functioned as normal, and then there was a clunking noise that everyone seemed to hear. Now, this was the pendle bearings wearing out. Now, Stuart, what is a pendle bearing?
Well,
is that like a counterweight?
Yeah, well, like all bearings on bridges, it allows the bridge to move as it expands and contracts. Yeah. Okay. Now, what I'm not aware of is whether the bearings were at both ends. I don't know whether Kessock was fixed at one end and free at the other. Is that the case with it at the north end, did you say?
I think so.
Okay. So that would imply that the bridge was perhaps fixed at the south end and expands and contracts towards the north.
Yeah.
Right.
So these pendle bearings were under the piers behind the main towers. So they're basically like weights.
Right. So basically the piers are resting on them, and that's allowing the whole structure to move over the piers, the concrete piers, because obviously there's natural changes in temperature and these things always have an effect. You have to make an allowance for that. And like that 500 millimetre allowance for movement in the expansion joints, the bearings, they accommodate these movements as well.
Yeah. And they also act as if a big lorry goes over the middle, they'll hold the weight down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after a little while, these start to make a clunky noise. So these were replaced in 2003. Now you can see where the bearings are if you look at the piers behind the towers. They've got these big chunks on them. Yep. That's where the pendle bearings are. They had to expand them to get them out. Yeah, to replace them.
To jack up probably to get the existing ones out and put the new ones in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The northern expansion joint was replaced in 2011, and there was a contraflow on the bridge, and everyone was anticipating this because in 2013 and 2014 they resurfaced the bridge.
Huge project.
Huge project.
Extra trains put on and all sorts of things. Yeah.
It's resurfacing on something like that. That's not ordinary asphalt. That's the mastic asphalt.
That's mastic asphalt. So
they
realised they couldn't just patch it up. They had to rip it all off and put it all back up. And they replaced some of the barriers as well. Did they re-waterproof it, I think?
Yes, they did.
Oh, they would. If you've had that off, you would definitely re-waterproof that.
Yeah.
But it takes ages doing these things, because I heard a bit about when they'd done this on Forth, and it took a long time, to do it.
So it's...
mastic asphalts are great and they're long-lasting, but when they eventually need to be replaced, it can be a bit of a pain.
It's a massive job. Yeah.
So it's a Swiss surfacing called, is it Goose Asphalt?
Yes.
Goose Asphalt.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
And it was Category B listed by Historic Environment Scotland in 2019.
Rightly so.
Yeah. Because of the the earthquake buffers and how unique it is. And it is featured on the £100 banknote since 2007.
Well, it had been until the new polymer note came in.
Oh, is it gone?
And it's changed. It's now someone else. It's a person now, I believe, that's on the back of the £100 note.
A person?
Yeah.
We want structures in the archive.
It's Stuart, don't you know?
Is it?
You don't see many £100 notes these days. That's why we don't see them. No, that's sorry. I remember it being on £100 notes because I've seen it a few times.
You get you.
I actually worked with money for a while, so that was
all right.
It doesn't mean it was mine.
No.
And something was installed not too long ago, a new underdeck maintenance gantry, and this was installed by the Spencer Group Limited.
Oh yeah,
in 2021.
Spencers are Erskine. I'm
sorry,
Spencer's. I should be the Erskine fanboy here in the corner. I think I've said it about 12 times now. I'll shut up. But okay.
And that would have replaced an existing gantry.
An existing one, yeah. So it's like a train underneath the bridge, and they can go and drive along and.
And that'll be assisting with upcoming works.
What did they do used before that? Would it have been an under bridge unit?
No, I think it had a gantry.
This was just a replacement.
I think
for
so.
it.
I think it was a replacement gantry. Most of the major bridges would have had a gantry.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah. Okay.
And currently the bridge is maintained by Bear Scotland on behalf of Transport Scotland.
Indeed, it is.
And they look after it.
Yep.
Is that that's within the northwest unit?
Northwest unit.
Yep.
They look after it, and there's a depot just below it, so they have a nice view onto the bridge every day.
Indeed. Just to point out at this point, Transport Scotland will be investing more than £30 million in upgrading the bridge over the years ahead, including repainting all steelwork. They are currently installing a new structural health monitoring system, and I believe the seismic buffers have been replaced as well.
They have.
So there's a lot of work coming up there. So
and
interesting.
There's currently a wee gantry at the bottom, at the south end, making its way north, painting the girders. So they'll be all nice and freshened up because it's getting a bit weathered now.
Yeah.
With all the weather.
No, it absolutely needs to be done.
Another project that's going to be happening hopefully nearby is the Longman roundabout grade separation.
Oh, yeah.
I think, John, you're a big fan of this roundabout and you'd be sad to see
it
it go.
I'm not a fan of it at all. I don't know what way is worse. I have been stuck at it, but I'm not sure what it's particularly bad on match days. But I'm not sure what it's like. Duncan, maybe you can say what it's like coming from the 82 side.
Off peak, it's fine.
Yeah.
On peak, during the day, it can snarl.
Is that Inverness Cali Thistle?
That's the Cali Thistle
That's
Stadium.
that team that always seem to beat Celtic, isn't it? That's happened a few times.
Once upon a time, I think.
A few times. I seem to remember them beating Celtic a few times. Anyway, that's not
Celtic's
important.
nemesis at some point,
Right, Duncan, listen, thank you very much for that. That's been great.
No problem.
We do love a good big bridge, don't we?
I do.
And an anniversary.
Are we running out of big bridges? No, we've still got...
No, there's plenty more. Well, Forth Road Bridge will be 60 in 2 years. We've got Connell Bridge is 120 next year. We've got Clyde Tunnel is 60 next year. So all these big crossings.
It's like an inverted bridge.
There's
crossings.
There's still plenty of
40 years, we'll have the 80th of Kessock Bridge as well.
Exactly,
we'll all be here to do a podcast.
Indeed we will. Now, let me just talk a wee bit then about what we've got planned to celebrate the anniversary, because like with previous big bridges, we have been working closely with Transport Scotland and Bear Scotland and others to bring you a whole raft of new things.
Yes.
First and foremost, the third booklet in our series covering the major bridge anniversaries is here. When you're listening to this podcast, it will have been released. It's available on our website for £2.50. It's Kessock Bridge celebrating 40 years. Stunning photographs and graphics in there as always. Personally, think it's the best one we've done yet. Well worth a purchase. And of course, any proceeds from that will come and help us with our work as well.
So you can complete the collection.
Not complete the collection. You will add to your ongoing collection. Your ever-growing collection.
Even more.
There's more to come.
Add to the limited edition booklets and sell them on eBay. For
exactly, because they are limited edition. Let's not forget that.
Can't take them out the bag either.
Will they come signed by Duncan Macknight?
Of course they will.
Yes,
of course they will. We'll do a book signing at Waterstones.
We'll do a book signing. Yeah, our next bus garage event.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. We also have a new web article coming. Again, like we've done in the past, we have a very detailed web article, some stunning new photographs, a photo gallery coming in the back of that as well. Some nice graphics on the web page for you to see.
Mm-hmm. We've got the opening booklet on there as well.
We have the opening booklet available to view. If anyone's not seen it before, the original 1982 booklet, get on and have a look at that. And further to that, there will actually be an in-person event on the 5th of August, Friday the 5th of August, that has been organised by Bear Scotland up there, and we've been invited along to take part in that, and so has Transport Scotland. Yep. And crucially, some of the now retired engineers who were involved in the design and construction of the bridge. And we should say thanks to some of those guys, Duncan, because they have helped us.
Thanks to some of them. A couple of the guys, we've got Don Fraser, and we've got Ken Wilson and Jeff Booth. All were there when it was being built and have helped us immensely with our research. And a wee special thanks to Frances Ross. She's the daughter of Pat Hunter Gordon. So I went and met her and spoke to her about the campaign and Kessock Bridge. So she was great. So thanks to her for replying with the information.
Yeah. Good stuff. Very interesting. There's, as I say, so much more to come, and I hope everybody enjoys it. It's certainly, as I say, not a bridge I knew a great deal about prior to me doing some research. You've been a great help with some of this, and we do have some A9 stuff coming as well. So the route pages on the website will be expanded. The A9 pages coming. As well.
It's quite a long road, but I'm doing my best.
So there's a lot of information to
it's exciting time for the A9 because there's works going on there all the time.
So now's the time to record it as it is before all the changes come along. So we've got that coming too. So I think we've covered everything there, Duncan.
John, any final bits of Kessock Bridge you'd like to mention?
To be quite honest with you, I have one thing to say about it. As a bridge itself, for me, it has always behaved. I have never been stuck on that. I've never even been done in with the roadworks. The only thing I think it's changed, it went from a 70 to a 50 mile an hour.
70 to 50.
As with most major bridges in Scotland.
And I think that wasn't targeted at Kessock. It was just a policy they adopted, which was fair enough. But I do remember when you could drive over there at 70.
Designed for 70 miles an hour, of course.
For 70,
I was just going to finish, Duncan, with the Three Firths campaign. We should say that Dornoch was ultimately constructed in 1991.
Cromarty was finished in 79. Cromarty was the first one. And then we had Dornoch in 1991. That was a wee bit later on. So we finally had the new route up north.
Ideal.
We speak a bit about those in our previous A9 podcast, don't we? A little bit. So
we'll revisit them one day. Revisit them.
And I should say the web address for the new web article will be at our website, scottisroadsarchive.org/Kessock-Bridge,
which you can link to on the site, and you'll see it all there.
Exactly. Brilliant. And we will have a few celebrations in social media.
Keep an eye on social media. Lots of stuff coming up.
And some new photos as well. Now, as always, we say if you've enjoyed this podcast, you want to hear more, you'll get all of them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean.
Even YouTube.
Anywhere you get them.
And we've also got our social media channels as well. You mentioned there we're going to have some stuff going on about Kessock, but it's Scotland-wide now, so you'll see everything the then and now posts and the great stuff you've heard from Duncan. So check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And I've said this before, but please leave our podcast a review if you enjoy it. Give us 5 stars, give us a wee comment. It lets us spread the word, get more listeners in. Let people know what the Scottish Roads Cast and the Scottish Roads Archive are up to.
What we are, what we do.
Indeed. And Duncan, thanks again for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
It's always great to
have
you.
Good to talk about Kessock Bridge.
Yes. Good to hear about it as well. Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.